At Wednesday's Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, Senator Ted Cruz grilled Biden official Elizabeth Rosenberg over the Biden administration's approach to Iran. Rosenberg is the Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing and Financial Crimes at the Treasury Department. Cruz's line of questioning centered around what he saw as an inadequate sanctions program against Iran. The Texas senator, who is a possible 2024 Republican presidential contender, has long decried Democratic policies pertaining to Iran. He fiercely opposed President Obama's nuclear deal and has blasted President Biden's Iran policy from day one.
Ms. Rosenberg, for decades, Iran has used Russia to evade sanctions. Recently, we've seen that situation reversed, with Russia using Iran as a hub to evade our sanctions in response to Putin's further aggression against Ukraine. I'm specifically concerned about Iran supplying Russia with weapons. The Iranian regime has been supplying Putin with drones that threaten to stall the enormous progress that our Ukrainian allies have been making retaking their territory. Now, the Biden administration has sanctioned some of the Iranian drone manufacturers and the transportation companies, and that was certainly a good start. But it hasn't worked. Iran continues to supply these and other weapons. Now, I believe one of the reasons that it hasn't worked is because you've stopped short of targeting the Iranian banks, including the Iranian central bank, that enable these sales with the same powerful authorities you've used elsewhere. Why hasn't the Biden administration imposed additional sanctions on Iranian banks involved in the supply of weapons to Russia?
Senator, thank you for your question. It is particularly horrifying and egregious when Russia is able to use entities and individuals to supply its military equipment, its materiel, in violation of sanctions. In the instance you were talking about from earlier this month, where we designated Iranian entities supplying drones to Russia, that is an example of Russia's evasion. They were supplying to a designated entity. And we are looking for every opportunity to go after nodes in a network of procurement that Russian designated individuals are using to seek materiel and technology to field its battlefield equipment.
So, Ms. Rosenberg, I'm a little dismayed. Every word you said was non-responsive to my question. My question was, why hasn't the Biden administration imposed additional sanctions on Iranian banks involved in the supply of weapons to Russia? So let me try it again.
Senator, we're looking for good opportunities and the relevant intelligence and information to substantiate packages to go after evasion networks, including with respect to Iran. So I take your point and appreciate this one. I'd be happy to continue talking with you and your staff as we put together the packages to do so. This is a priority for us, looking for Iranian and North Korean supplying of Russian materiel.
Okay, let's take that answer at face value. Do you commit to this committee to maintaining powerful secondary sanctions on Iranian banks, and especially the Iranian central bank, for their role in supplying weapons to Russia, even if there's another nuclear deal?
Thank you for the question. I can commit to this committee to powerfully imposing and enforcing sanctions on any evasionary network, Iranian or otherwise, that supplies Russia with military equipment to fund this brutal war.
How about that funds it, like the Iranian central bank?
Funding, facilitation of financial or material means, those are all priorities across the administration.
But you haven't done it yet.
We have gone after a variety of evasionary networks.
But not the banks.
We have named financial nodes in different instances, and furthermore, companies acting as financial cutouts. Russians, unfortunately, are best in class at evading and creating front companies.
At the end of the day, it's not complicated. We know the banks are doing this, so it's not best in class evasion. They're doing it openly and brazenly, and the question is, does the Biden administration have the political willingness to sanction them, or is the Iran deal that is such a holy grail for this White House that they're willing to look a blind eye while the Iranian banks fund weapons that are being used by Putin to kill Ukrainians right now in the midst of the invasion?
Senator, I think we share the political commitment and intensity of focus with many of the members of this committee and of Congress to go after evasionary individuals and networks and entities wherever they may be located that are
Okay, let's
funding
change the
Russia's
topic
war.
for a second, and let's go to another aspect that contributed to the war in Ukraine, which is Nord Stream 2, and actually Nord Stream 1. As you know, I authored legislation sanctioning Nord Stream 2. It stopped the construction of Nord Stream 2 until President Biden waived those sanctions, which allowed Putin to complete the pipeline and cause the invasion of Ukraine. Right now, it appears both of those pipelines have been bombed or destroyed or sabotaged in some way. That sabotage was carried out either by the United States, by Russia, or by some third party. I assume you're not going to tell this administration, if it was the Biden administration, that blew up those pipelines.
I'd be happy to defer to my colleague from the State Department. Those authorities for Nord Stream 2 rest with the State Department.
So, Senator, we've said it's apparent sabotage. There are investigations happening in Europe. We'll see what the investigations turn up.
So does that mean you're not going to tell us if it was the Biden administration?
Senator, I think even the question poses a premise that is impossible to answer in an effective way. I mean,
you can answer yes or no. Let me just ask this, because my time has expired. Let me ask you a final question, Ms. Rosenberg. I think the pipelines being out of commission is good for the United States and good for Europe. Would you agree it would have been much better to stop those pipelines using our sanction authority, which had been successful, rather than what we have now, which is an environmental disaster due to the sabotage? Would you agree that sanctions would have been a much more effective way to do this?
Senator, to the point of European energy security and denying Russia economic advantage and opportunity, and the opportunity to engage in a manipulation for Europe on the end of the pipeline. I think there's a variety of different ways, and I appreciate the collaboration we've had with this committee and with Congress in general in addressing those key priorities. I think more broadly on the sanctions versus our diplomacy, our energy supply relationships, it's the combination of all of them that can best advance our purposes.
Thank you.
It is
Senator
amazing
Cruz.
you're not willing to answer that question.
Senator Cruz.